Hello students and friends. Today I am going to tell about homeopathic materia medica. Before start, please subscribe to this channel. Study and identification of idiosyncrasies. 1. Frequent and rare idiosyncrasies. Material body of man consists of simple elements found in the material world. Not all elements are found in the same quantity. Our body is rich with some elements like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, calcium, phosphor, sodium and potassium, while others like zinc, copper, and selenium exist only in small quantities. Accordingly, some idiosyncrasies are frequently found influencing people, while others are rarely found. Some idiosyncrasies affect greatly all organic systems and psychology, producing many and characteristic symptoms, and thus are considered as basic. Some other idiosyncrasies affect us only partly and slightly, producing only some and general symptoms, and thus are called secondary. For example, they may affect mainly the skin or the peptic system. Furthermore, many of them have no special psychological profile, either because we haven't yet revealed it or because it doesn't exist. One thing is certain, as clinical experience shows, there are certain idiosyncrasies that correspond to deep, wide, and long-acting homeopathic medicines, and others that correspond to superficial, narrow, and short-acting ones. Some homeopathic idiosyncrasies can be described in only a few pages and others in hundreds. That's the reason why I started analyzing to you the most frequent ones. The polycrests, that is, the ones we use often, so as to have a firm basis to build on the other ones, the rare and less studied. Rare idiosyncrasies can be described in relation to their similarities and dissimilarities to the frequent ones. For example, if we have captured well enough the picture of platina, then it is easy to describe relative but rare and narrow idiosyncrasies like Tarantula hispanica or palladium. 2. Occasional idiosyncrasies. There are also some idiosyncrasies that tend to develop occasionally due to special conditions and subside after a short while. For example, a person is influenced for long and steadily from a certain idiosyncrasy under usual conditions. But then, due to some extreme for the person conditions, he develops a certain new idiosyncratic picture that may last only for a few hours, days, weeks, or a couple of months. This idiosyncrasy will subside either by itself or after proper homeopathic treatment. For instance, an individual usually under the influence of lycopodium may develop during a severe cold the idiosyncrasy arsenicum, and after a while return back to lycopodium. Or a woman natrum muriaticum may develop after a love disappointment a temporary picture of ignatia and then return back to its previous idiosyncrasy. In general, most persons are influenced usually during their lifetime from 5 to 10 relative idiosyncrasies that correspond to their miasmas, wills, and goals. Occasionally, according to conditions, they may also develop other temporary idiosyncratic pictures. 3. The history of identification of homeopathic idiosyncrasies. As I have already told you, there are some idiosyncrasies for which we only know their actions in specific physical pictures having to do with illnesses like urine infection, arthritis, colitis, etc. We haven't got any complete and thorough psychosomatic picture, either because it is not yet revealed or because that's only what they've got. Let's not forget that the original clinical experience of Hahnemann concerned occasional pictures of acute illnesses and conditions for which he prescribed homeopathic medicines in low potencies like the 30th or the 200th. We started having wider and more thorough idiosyncratic pictures as years of provings passed by. Hahnemann's discovery of miasmas and chronic diseases helped a lot to this procedure. So, later on, James Tyler Kent and other great homeopathic doctors started prescribing not according to occasional acute illness pictures but according to idiosyncratic pictures. That is, they started the first steps of doing what I and some other colleagues are doing today. This had a major impact on therapeutic results. We could not only cure the acute illness but furthermore we could lessen his chronic predispositions and moreover balance his idiosyncratic and miasmatic characteristics. We must not forget that even great teachers like Kant died without being able to identify the idiosyncratic picture of even polycrests like Medorhinum. For example, he describes it in his Materia Medica in only 4 pages and most important without any clear identification of its psychological profile and essence. That is the reason why you will rarely find Medorhinum in Kant's repertory even concerning important symptoms. Unfortunately, even nowadays, you will not find in any Materia Medica the real essence of basic idiosyncrasies like lachesis, valerian or Medorhinum as I have already described it to you. I don't bow about it. I am aware of what I tell you, and I am also aware that I haven't identified the essence of some other idiosyncrasies that other homeopathic doctors have done. It is also a fact that some idiosyncrasies that were very frequently found in the past are now rare, while others that were in the past rare are now polycrests. We should not forget that when homeopathy was found, humanity lived a Hysteric era, while nowadays we live in a clearly syphilitic era. Thus, nowadays, syphilitic idiosyncrasies are more frequently found compared to Hysteric ones. 4. Homeopathic Materia Medica. How many kinds of homeopathic Materia Medica do we have? Are there many kinds? To what they differ? First of all, there are those Materia Medica that could be called records of experimental data or Materia Medica of provings. They simply record in details all the physical and psychological symptoms that have developed during the provings of a certain substance. Then we have those Materia Medica that could be called comparative Materia Medica of provings. They compare the symptoms that have developed from several systems during several provings in different countries and times by several doctors. This enables us to find out the main characteristic symptoms of an idiosyncrasy. Another kind of Materia Medica are the pathogenic Materia Medica. By connecting symptoms of a certain organic system or systems, they try to identify the pathogenic mechanism of a disorder. For example, as concerns natrum muriaticum, its constipation, dryness, and sensitivity of skin and mucus, aversion or desire for salt have to do with the disorder of metabolism of sodium chloride. Since the time of Kant, a new kind of Materia Medica emerged, the Idiosyncratic Materia Medica. They try to identify the essence, the main idea of an idiosyncrasy, that is, the skeleton around which all other symptoms are built upon. For example, the essence of natrum muriaticum is its specific kind of introvert attitude that leads to all other specific behaviors concerning irritability, work, family, relations, society, etc. Last, but not least, are those Materia Medica that can be called miasmatic idiosyncratic Materia Medica. That's the kind of Materia Medica that I am teaching you. They are the most complete ones because they employ miasmatic theory in an attempt to explain the essence of an idiosyncrasy and the relation of this essence to the whole picture, both physical and psychological. For example, we cannot fully understand natrum muriaticum if we don't realize that its essence, that is, its introvert attitude, is but a deeply Hysteric attitude, and that this Hysteric tendency runs through all its numerous different symptoms like dryness of skin and mucus, easily offended, constipation, aversion for consolation, cannot urinate in the presence of others, tension, headaches, dignity, etc. 5. When is an idiosyncrasy fully identified? Miasmatic identification of an idiosyncrasy enables us to bind together different phenotypic behaviors of the same idiosyncrasy, even seemingly controversial ones, under the umbrella of the common genotype, that is, under the same miasmatic tendency. For example, lachesis among other may also have two seemingly opposite phenotypes of behavior. It may appear as the cruel, overprotective perpetrator or as the sensitive, weeping victim. But in both cases the common thing is the underlying genotype of the syphilitic predominant person. An experienced homeopathic doctor, well acquainted with miasmatic, idiosyncratic materia medica, cannot be fooled. He has learned to recognize miasmatic tendencies underlying any superficial behavior. This is a very valuable thing in the syphilitic era that we live in, where syphilitic idiosyncrasies tend to be disguised. An experienced homeopathic doctor can even predict the behavior of individuals influenced by a certain idiosyncrasy in all situations, even strange or awkward. He may say how they will react in family, work, love, politics, religion, etc. He may even, up to a point, predict what language or words they will tend to use. We are not talking about the description of his behavior in stage B, C, or D, but also in stage A, that is, in a normal, healthy, and balanced state. It is then and only then that we can talk about complete and satisfying identification of an idiosyncrasy. It is then and only then that we have fully developed to maximum our therapeutic abilities. Why did I mention all the above? Because the trainee homeopathic doctor comes in touch with several different descriptions of the same idiosyncrasy by several teachers of different schools. How can he discriminate and choose the correct one? He has to take in consideration all the above mentioned that are in accordance with the law of hierarchy and law of whole. The more he perceives an idiosyncrasy as a whole, and the more he perceives its hierarchic levels, the better he can treat his patient. Moreover, he has to confirm in clinical practice what they teach him. Any given general truth that has not been a live individual experience has no value. No matter how many recipes you read, that does not make you a chef. You have to cook them again and again to become an experienced chef. 6. Satisfactory identification of idiosyncrasies means deep and effective cure. There are so many ambitious homeopathic masters and researchers nowadays. They tend to violate universal laws by doing provings to unnatural substances like cortisone, antibiotics, and several complicated chemicals. Somebody could say, how come you consider such a procedure as wrong? You see, I don't refer to the procedure of provings. That is correct and scientific. I am referring to the attitude of the researcher when he asks nature by his experimentation. He has to be inspired by universal laws in order to ask in the correct way so as to receive useful answers. The problem is that if you use a man-made chemical substance, then will it have any resemblance or use concerning idiosyncrasies that are given by nature and have a certain background and usefulness? It is true that any chemical substance will produce a certain pathological picture, a certain mostly physical syndrome of symptoms, but does this have any resemblance with natural illnesses? Moreover, does this have anything to do with disease in general? You see, disease is a natural general disorder of the etheric body following certain roots. These roots create certain specific idiosyncratic disorders and not just any one. Whenever you create a certain pathological picture at the lab by provings, that doesn't mean that it has its similar picture in natural illnesses. If it is partly similar to some physical symptoms or to some illness, that doesn't mean that it is similar to the whole, to the naturally given disease, as specific etheric disorder in a certain etheric root. Then if it's not similar, it will not cure completely and permanently, it may even suppress symptoms or illness or the person as a whole. For example, chronic use of cortisone may cause a certain physical picture in patients that may, of course, vary from patient to patient. We must always bear in mind that this is not a natural illness, this is an artificial laboratory disorder. If I do a cortisone proving, I will identify this artificial disorder. Then, the next thing to do is to prepare the homeopathic medicine cortisonum, which I will administer for resembling symptoms and resembling illnesses. The problem is that if this proving picture does not correspond to naturally existing etheric disorders, it will not cure or may even suppress and interfere unnaturally. You must remember that even when we use plants and minerals for provings that are after all natural substances, only a few times we come to a complete resembling picture to major natural etheric disorders, that is, to idiosyncrasies. Idiosyncrasies exist on their own and may affect a patient in a specific way in everyday life. Provings of unnatural substances may create several pictures, but the question still remains, do these pictures represent natural roots of disease? It is true that often minerals that exist in abundance in nature, for example natrum muriaticum or silica, do correspond as homeopathic medicines to idiosyncrasies that are in abundance, but that is not always the case. It has to be confirmed in clinical practice. The same thing stands bold also for plants. But still, we may find some homeopathic medicines of animal origin, like lachesis, that comes from the poison of a snake, who is one of the most frequent idiosyncrasies that affect women nowadays. Only those mineral, plant, and animal substances that when potentized have a certain affinity with etheric disorders that are behind natural illnesses, can be considered useful homeopathic medicines. And this is in accordance with the law of similimum. Homeopathic medicines must be similar to natural illnesses, to natural roots of disease, to natural imbalances of the flow of etheric energy, so as to correspond to idiosyncratic influences of a certain kind. 7. Whenever we play God, we become dangerous. You see, some things, not to say all things, are given by nature, by God. Human wisdom is to discover the natural way of things and use this knowledge according to naturally given universal laws. Whenever our motives are human, egoistic, and arbitrary, we become unnatural and as a result, dangerous. Whenever we enter a lab as arrogant scientists trying to correct nature by finding the remedy for cancer, the remedy for old age, or the cure of mortality, then we are not just foolish, we are dangerous foolish. If the above were just theoretical or the exception, then no big deal. If only some lunatics lived in some faraway mountains, then why deal with it? But such lunatics are top scientists working for rich and powerful pharmaceutical companies that nowadays control not only medical science but even state health policies. Their lunatic work becomes harmful chemical medicines that are prescribed by doctors that are no longer independent true scientists, they are simply prescribers. They prescribe whatever they present to them, in the same way that all merchants sell what factories produce without any discrimination. The only criterion is if it sells. What are the consequences? Major. Just think for a minute, how many chemical drugs have been given worldwide and how many unnatural techniques have been practiced by doctors to people internationally. There isn't, nowadays, even a single cottage without its small or big pharmacy full of several chemical drugs, drugs that consist unnatural treatments that violate all universal laws. In the same way that we perform ecological crimes on plants and animals. By modern agriculture and animal breeding, in the same way we perform health crimes as doctors to people and humanity. Some of you may say that I exaggerate. I assure you that from my point of view, I force myself to say less than I see and realize respecting the universal law of truth. 8. What is the meaning of identification of an idiosyncrasy? Let's go back to a very important question: how can we study efficiently and identify efficiently any given idiosyncrasy? That's what we shall learn right now. The first thing to do is to read all that Kent says about this idiosyncrasy in his Materia Medica. Up to now it's one of the most precious ones since, as we've said, it has managed to identify the essence of some idiosyncrasies, although there are many exceptions. None of the other classical Materia Medica of Hahnemann, Allen, Herring, and Clark have managed to capture and describe the essence of any idiosyncrasy. They were, more or less, comparative provings Materia Medica, very good ones but still not idiosyncratic ones. In order to be able to identify an idiosyncrasy, capturing its essence, you have to have great and correct experience. Just by laying down a number of psychological symptoms and characteristics, that does not mean that you have seized its profile. How can we understand that someone has captured the essence of an idiosyncrasy? Only when he can talk about it for hours without any manuscript referring to how would it react in all situations, and only when it would recognize it in patients and cure it in everyday clinical practice. Theory and practice joined together. When it is certain that you know your friend John? Only if you can talk about him for hours, referring not only to his characteristics but also to how he would react in this or that case. Look at true lovers. They know even little things about their companion. They know every detail existing, they can even predict how their companion would react in certain conditions, what would hurt him and what would please him. Isn't that love? Well, that's the kind of love we doctors need to have about idiosyncrasies so as to be efficient doctors. During the past lectures about idiosyncrasies I have described orally, without any use of manuscript, the essence of all basic and frequent idiosyncrasies. This was not done so as to show off to you or to exhibit my capacity of memorizing. I did it only because I can do it, and only to show you that you can do it also after some years of true practice. Thank God, I've lived and practiced enough the last 25 years so as to become familiar with most idiosyncrasies. They are my lovers and I am their lover. Too bad that they are but abnormalities. Laughter, too bad that they consist the whole of human imbalance and disease. But you can't bring someone back to normal if you are not well acquainted with abnormal. You can do that also. It isn't only a matter of time, of course. It is also a matter of correct education, correct clinical practice according to universal laws, and correct moral attitude. I want to show you that you don't need any damn fancy computerized expert method. I want to show you that you can be independent from any master of homeopathy. I want to show you that you needn't depend completely on any repertory or any existing Materia Medica so as to be effective. That does not mean that you shouldn't refer from time to time to repertories or Materia Medica. They are useful as references but not as diagnostic tools for the diagnosis of any idiosyncrasy. They are more useful as reminders, especially when it comes to acute illnesses, but they can't replace your heart and mind if you have already seized the essences of idiosyncrasies. 9. The great difference of the clinician from the academic doctor. I never tried to memorize my medical knowledge, I just couldn't do it. Anything you memorize you easily forget it. Real knowledge needs imagination, logic, inquiring disposition, synthetic and analytic thinking. Even relaxation and intuition. Even in allopathic medicine that deals only with the body and laboratory findings and numbers, memorizing produces only prescribers and academic doctors. It does not produce scientists, clinical doctors and moreover effective healers. I still remember many of my fellow students that we called plants. Nowadays we call them nerds that had a very good memorizing capacity, they did so well in tests but when it came to clinical practice, they were lost. Other students that used their mind and heart and logic did not do well in tests but they were fine clinical doctors and healers. Let me give you an example of what I mean. A theoretical academic herbalist may have memorized thousands of information about hundreds of plants, scientific name, properties, researches and experiments. If you let him out on a prairie together with a practical but experienced herbalist, then who will be better and more efficient in gathering and using herbs? The same thing stands bold for medicine and especially for homeopathic medicine. Academic medicine is one thing, clinical medicine is another thing. Theory is one thing, practice is another. Moreover, in homeopathic clinical practice, the doctor must be well acquainted with reality, with everyday life. He must know the streets, he must attend life's university. 10. Effective prescribing presupposes healing of the healer. In homeopathy, effective prescribing presupposes healing of the healer, that is, correct moral attitude. In allopathy you may smoke like a chimney and at the same time tell your patient take these medicines and quit smoking. Or you may be neurotic and tell your patient get a sedative and a sleeping pill. This will not affect the selection of the chemical drug that corresponds to his illness and consequently his treatment. If you are a homeopathic doctor, such an attitude will have a major impact to treatment. Since you, yourself, are the device of measuring the idiosyncrasy of the patient, if you aren't well balanced you will reach a wrong diagnosis and thus your treatment will be a failure. If, of course, you alienate homeopathy and turn it into herbal medicine, where the rule is I give this herb for this illness, then you will prescribe for local illness and you will have poor or no results. The reason for this is the violation of homeopathic laws, like for example the law of similar. You see, if you use a football in a basketball game, the final result is that you play basketball because the laws of the game are that of basketball. In the same way, if you use homeopathic medicines but according to the laws of allopathy or herbal medicine, then you treat allopathically. My aim isn't just to give you information about homeopathy, such a thing means nothing to me. My aim is to inspire you theoretically, philosophically and even morally, and to motivate you to acquire the right moral attitude as doctors, scientists, and human beings. This will enable you to heal your idiosyncratic weaknesses and thus become a balanced healer. 11. Don't become weak-willed case takers, students, or just users of computer expert programs. My goal is to help you become efficient detectives that can smell idiosyncrasies miles away. The worst thing you can do to yourselves is to become simple ignorant users of computer expert systems that promise homeopathic diagnosis no matter who you are, no matter what attitude and psychological level you have achieved. You can also end up becoming weak-willed case takers that depend on other doctors, never becoming independent doctors and scientists. Or you can end up becoming repertory slaves chasing symptoms in an endless ocean of references. Any path of the above will not make you an independent thinking scientist, a healer. Any one of the above will make you a fun of experts, masters and schools. In the same way that I will present you basic and frequent idiosyncrasies, I will also present you much more less frequent ones. I will teach you only what I have confirmed of them in clinical practice the last 25 years. And not what is written in books, no matter how great teacher the author is considered. Books must refer to reality and not vice versa. I must admit that the picture that I present for some less frequent idiosyncrasies is limited, either because that's what there is to say or because I haven't fully identified these idiosyncrasies. We must be honest, both to ourselves and to those we teach. For me, it's meaningless to present you another 50 or 100 rare or partly proved idiosyncrasies just by laying out symptoms from provings of others with sole aim to present myself as another one great teacher that wrote a new Materia. Medica. There are so many such, so why create another one? I will not present anything new and worthy. I will just rehash others' notes, or even worse, others' rehashes. As I have already said, I am not an academic doctor, I am a clinical doctor. The only thing I can give you is what I have confirmed in every day clinical practice, that it works, it heals, it has therapeutic effects. I could cope from Kent or other great teachers, but such a thing would be worthy only if what I cope has clinical value nowadays. Let me remind you that Kent himself, when confronting allopathic doctors of his time, said, "There are no authorities in science, only laws." This stands bold also for homeopathy, only that information that has been drawn out of life according to universal laws and has been confirmed and reconfirmed in clinical practice is worthy and effective. In my effort to present you the main idea, the core, the essence of each idiosyncrasy, I have left out details and general physical symptoms. This was done deliberately so as not to put aside the essence for the sake of memorizing less important information. You can always refer to Materia Medica of Herring, Allen, or Clark, or to the repertory of Kent for further general or specific physical symptoms. No matter how genius is someone, he just can't remember thousands of symptoms, and moreover there is no need for such a thing. If you have captured the main picture, then you can confirm it by referring to all other secondary and specific symptoms that are written down in books. Your mind and heart is the RAM current memory of your brain, and books are the hard disk memory. RAM memory is limited deliberately so as to be functional. The greater RAM memory is, the less functional brain gets. You should never forget, of course, that man is one thing and computer is another. There is a great difference between an intelligent human mind and a stupid machine that may have millions of recorded symptoms in the form of a repertory but no knowledge and logic of his own. Take all homeopathic bibliography and put it in a computer. Then make connections and create a computer expert program. You have nothing more than an idiot with much information. A whole store of bricks, iron, and wood does not make a house, not even in a million years. You need live human intelligence, you need brain and psyche. I may be sarcastic, but in no way can I accept as homeopathy all those computer expert systems. They violate every universal and homeopathic law, and mostly law of hierarchy. A machine belongs to material world, information on psychic world, and man is a living multilevel creature. Those who have created these computer expert systems would be honest if they said that they created electronic homeopathic repertories and systems for the quick and easy search of symptoms. I have no problem to accept such a thing. But I can't accept that they can diagnose any idiosyncrasy. That is a man's job. That is a scientist's job. That is a heart and mind job. That's a real clinical doctor's job. Your job. 12. The special smell of each idiosyncrasy. Let me put it in simple words, if you get acquainted with the smell, taste and look of each idiosyncrasy, then you will be able to recognize it in a minute and confirm it in another 5 to 10 minutes. The rest 30 to 40 minutes of a homeopathic history is but the procedure of case taking and communication with the patient. That's the whole thing. That's the truth. The whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Then you can call yourselves homeopathic doctors and scientists, or else you are just weak-willed case takers, enslaved to other doctors or to computer expert systems or masters. Let's say that you are an ignorant city boy and you go to the country to gather edible wild herbs and greens. Then you bring it back to the old lady villager. She smiles with contempt and throws it all to the garbage. You may be lucky if she keeps one or two of them. If this is true for some dozens of herbs, won't it be true for thousands of physical and psychological symptoms of a complicated multilevel human creature? If you haven't learned to recognize and evaluate correctly the nonverbal behavior of man, then you have already missed half the diagnosis. Let me remind you that we have talked about homeopathic history during 3 lectures. The one was about nonverbal behavior, the second was about general physical symptoms, and the third was about psychological symptoms. So, you can understand how important nonverbal behavior is. But you will find not a single clue of it in any repertory or in any computer expert system. You will be able to diagnose effectively idiosyncrasies when you have completed 3 steps. Listen to the analysis of homeopathic idiosyncrasies, listen to recorded live clinical cases, and attend live clinical practice in my office. 13. Steps for the study and identification of any idiosyncrasy. Apart from these steps, I will hand to you today a method for the study and identification of any idiosyncrasy. The steps of this method are: 1. Step 1. Read all about the idiosyncrasy you want to know from Kent's Materia. Medica. He refers first to general physical symptoms, then to psychological, and finally to specific physical symptoms classified to organic systems. Then draw a skeleton of symptoms from the most important and central to peripherals according to your personal interpretation. Bind relative symptoms together and connect causes with results. For example, as concerns natrum muriaticum, easily offended and aversion, weeping in front of others originates from Psychic introversion. From this main psychological characteristic arise also several other psychosomatic symptoms like nervous headaches, oppression, chest, lump, throat, etc. That's what I mean by binding of symptoms according to law of hierarchy. 2. Step 2. Go to chapters Mind and Generalities of Kent's repertory. Write down all symptoms that appear in degree 3, capital bold letters, or degree 2, italics. Then go and bind all these symptoms to your previous basic skeleton of symptoms. If you want to expand your study, something that I would not recommend for your first steps, then go and do the same using other classic materia medica like Hahnemann's, Herring's, Allen's and Clark's. If you think you are done, then you are wrong. You have created a skeleton and added flesh, but still you have a dead body in front of you, without any life. The next step is the most important. It will give life, that is, clinical confirmation, to your bibliographical study. 3. Step 3. Clinical confirmation. It can be done by listening to recorded clinical cases, by attending clinical practice next to an experienced homeopathic doctor, and finally by practicing homeopathy yourselves. You will have The chance to reject or confirm and enrich the bibliographical skeleton. Picture you have originally created in your mind. You must always bear in mind that reality surpasses any bibliographical study. How does confirmation take place? Let's say that you have been based on certain characteristic symptoms so as to prescribe lycopodium. You give it and the patient gets better as a whole quickly and intensely. Then you are certain that your prescription was correct. If the characteristic symptoms you have been based on for your prescription have been regulated, then you are certain that they are indeed diagnostic of this idiosyncrasy. Step 4. Complete identification of an idiosyncrasy comes only after many years of intense homeopathic clinical practice. It is only then that you have mastered the knowledge of an idiosyncrasy when you recognize it not only on stage B, C, and D of disease but also on stage A, that is, when he is in a rather normal phase. Then he doesn't present symptoms but only idiosyncratic characteristics. Usually people on this early stage do not go to the doctor, except some persons that are afraid of illnesses and come to the doctor preventively. When you have mastered an idiosyncrasy you can suspect or recognize it. Even on first sight, on first motions, on first expressions. It shouts to you, "I am a lycopodium case." You become the experienced herbalist that can identify a species from first sight, or an experienced zoologist that can identify an animal from his roar or footsteps or even smell. When you have mastered an idiosyncrasy then you can identify a person even before he open his mouth to talk, only from his non-verbal behavior. Then, and only then you can talk about idiosyncrasies for hours without looking at any notes. You simply don't talk out of bibliography, you don't talk out of imagination, you talk out of experience, you just reproduce reality. 14. Idiosyncratic Families. According to universal law of hierarchy, I will first teach you basic and frequent idiosyncrasies and then rare and secondary ones. According to the same law, I will give you their essence based mainly on psychological symptoms and important general physical symptoms. Trying to be objective, I will teach you only what I have confirmed and reconfirmed after years and years of bibliographical research and clinical practice. I have classified idiosyncrasies not according to the origin of their raw material. Some do so, classifying them into metal, non-metal, plants of this family and so on. I don't deny that this may help recognize some similarities. Problems arise when we try forcibly to find common ground and project out subjective theories and memorizing rules. On the contrary, being a clinical doctor, I go straight to clinical practice and classify idiosyncrasies only according to clinical similarities that appear during homeopathic case-taking. I identify behaviors from the time the patient phones me to set an appointment until the time he leaves my office. My classification is clinically and diagnostically oriented, and this is of great help to any homeopathic doctor. This clinical classification is as follows: Hysteric, Psychotic, Syphilitic, Hysteric, Egoistic, Intellectual, Irritable, Phobic, Psychotic, Mentally declined, drugged, tired and suicidal. This does not mean that an idiosyncrasy belongs only to one class, it may belong to more than one. What's the use of this classification? When a patient comes to me and his main characteristic is phobias, then I search first in the phobic idiosyncratic family. If his main characteristics are syphilitic, I search first in the syphilitic idiosyncratic family and so on. This is not an absolute rule. I must first be certain of his main characteristics. I shall now tell you who are the main representatives of each class, starting hierarchically from the most important and frequent to the Secondary ones. Hysteric idiosyncrasies. Natrum muriaticum, ignatia, sepia, natrum carbonicum, serinum. Silica, alumina, gelseemium, thuja, staphylos agria. Psychotic idiosyncrasies. Medorinum, phosphor, pulsatilla, psychotic sulfur. Syphilitic idiosyncrasies. Lachesis, anacardium, syphilinum, naja. Hysteric idiosyncrasies. Lilium tigrinum, asafoetida, moschus, semicifuga, cyclamen, cactus. Egoistic idiosyncrasies. Platina, valeriana, palladium, tarantula hispanica. Intellectual idiosyncrasies. Lycopodium, sulfur, graphites. Irritable idiosyncrasies. Nux vomica, stramonium, tuberculinum, mercury, china, zincum. Iodine, nitric acid, coffea cruda, apis, chamomilla, heparsulfur. Phobic idiosyncrasies. Phosphorus, argentum nitricum, arsenicum, aconitum, pulsatilla. Calcarea carbonica, causticum, mancinella, kali arsenicum, cactus. Psychotic idiosyncrasies. Hyoscyamus, stramonium, belladonna, helleborus. Drugged idiosyncrasies. Cannabis indica, opium, coca, glenoinum, nux moscata. Mentally declined idiosyncrasies. Boericke carbonica, bufo, ambergris. Tired idiosyncrasies. Nitric acid, phosphoric acid, muriatic acid. Suicidal idiosyncrasies. Aurum metallicum. 15. Irritable and nervous idiosyncrasies. Irritable idiosyncrasies are those who easily get angry and usually express their anger. They may shout, curse, throw or break things, hit someone or burst on themselves by hitting their head with their hands or by tearing their clothes or pulling their hair, etc. Such irritable idiosyncrasies are nux vomica, stramonium, tuberculinum, mercury, china, zincum, iodine, nitric acid, coffea cruda, apis, chamomilla and heparsulfur. Nervous idiosyncrasies are those who easily get angry but usually do not express their anger, then this anger causes nervous physical symptoms like nervous tension, headaches, colitis, neuralgia, nervous high blood pressure, nervous itching, etc. Such idiosyncrasies are usually natrum muriaticum, ignatia, staphylos agria, and valeriana. 16. Neurovegetative idiosyncrasies. Neurovegetative idiosyncrasies I name those that have psychosomatic symptoms and several intense phobias regarding their health and life that arise from the imbalance of the neurovegetative, autonomic nervous system together. These symptoms may mimic several illnesses of the heart, lungs, and viscera in general, but all blood and other tests never confirm an illness. We have to do with functional disorders due to severe anxiety expressed in body functions. Such symptoms have no specific type, they constantly change from one system to another, from one place to another. No firm correlation can be done with space, time, weather conditions, place, nutrition, sleep, etc. The only common thing they have is that they are accompanied by intense anxiety, panic, fear about one's health or fear of death, fixed ideas. Sometimes fear of insanity and rush to the doctor for examination and tests. Such psychosomatic symptoms may be heart pain, burning chest, oppression chest, palpitation, dizziness, numbness, etc. Neurovegetative idiosyncrasies are phosphor, argentum nitricum, arsenicum, aconitum, calcarea carbonica, kali arsenicum, causticum, and mancinella. 17. Hysteric idiosyncrasies. Hysteric idiosyncrasies I call those that have numerous and strange Functional psychosomatic symptoms having only one common characteristic: patients make use of them to manipulate others, especially their close ones. Such hysteric psychosomatic symptoms are palpitation, dizziness, lump throat, inexplicable sudden temporary loss of voice, hearing or vision, sudden temporary paralysis, nervous retching or hiccup, difficult respiration, nausea, vomiting, nervous cough, bruised feeling all over, terrible pains all over, cramps, spasms, twitching, etc. These hysteric psychosomatic symptoms are always accompanied by hysteric psychological symptoms like terrible depression, extreme anxiety, extreme irritability and irascibility, unjustified dissatisfaction about everything, capriciousness, stubborn attitude, uncontrollable weeping, misery, ups and downs, and most of all, they want things to be done their way. If any doctor tries to classify all these symptoms in a single physical illness or even in several physical illnesses, he will become desperate. If he tries to reach a diagnosis of a psychic illness, he will be confused. Because these numerous symptoms imitate all psychic illnesses. Only one thing will help him sort things out: the conscious or semi-conscious deliberate use of these symptoms by the patient so as to have things his way. It is often the case that these persons, mostly women, have been raised in a family environment that satisfied all their whims and desires, thus they became spoiled grown-ups that have never learned discipline and team working. They are selfish and immature individuals. Their sole will is to have things their way, and moreover their immature and childish own way. For example, lachesis and platina idiosyncrasies influence individuals, making them prevailing and selfish, but these persons have certain concrete egoistic goals and achieve them in a mature, logic way. They have certain, well-designed plans and achieve them step by step. They don't want this minute this and the other minute another. They know what they want and why they want it. On the contrary, individuals influenced by hysteric idiosyncrasies, literally, don't know what they want it all and nothing. Their behavior makes no sense, you just can't address to their logic. They may be grown-ups, but they behave like spoiled, naughty little kids. No wonder why a hysteric blindness or paralysis never happens when the hysteric individual is alone. It always happens in front of others, and especially in front of those to be manipulated. Sometimes it may happen in the absence of the person in aim, but only to be reported and exaggerated when the person to be manipulated comes. It is, of course, a sudden, inexplicable temporary blindness with sudden onset and sudden recovery, while all laboratory tests and examinations reveal no pathology. It has to do with functional disorders. Hysterical symptoms develop mostly in women. The term hysteric isn't accidental. The word hystera in ancient Greek means uterus, an organ that exists only in women. When this term was used, men ruled and women had no rights and no way of expressing or demanding their rights in a direct way. So, the only way to achieve goals was the indirect one. One of such indirect ways was the hysteric one, which was favored by the role of women and especially girls as the spoiled sensitive pet of the house, especially in wealthy families. The little princes of the house could ask for anything to satisfy her whims, as long as he obeyed her father in all other serious matters. Even nowadays that women are the prevailing person in family in our developed Western countries, still most hysteric individuals are women. You can find, of course, hysteric men among homosexuals or among suppressed and coward men who haven't got the balls to stand up as men. This difference among men and women comes from the different nature of sexes. Due to her nature, a woman when imbalanced tends to become hysteric among other options, while a man tends to become violent among other options. Since they are different in balance, they will also be different in imbalance. Be careful. That doesn't mean that I support that men are superior or better than women or vice versa. When it comes to nature and universal laws, the only criterion that counts is moral level of the person, either man or woman. That's the reason why men and women of higher moral level do not argue about who is superior and get along pretty well, while men and women of lower moral level argue all the time. It is also true that two men or two women of lower moral level are in a constant fight. Let me remind you what Jesus did when his disciples asked him who is the best among us. Instead of answering, he washed their feet so as to give them a humility lesson. He showed them that the role of a superior in morality and psychological level person isn't to suppress inferiors but to serve them and make them better. His life was but a constant example of offer and humility. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe for more videos.